So I've just decided to make a quick little update video today, and starting off we're going to have a look at the S&P 500, where yesterday's session has closed just beneath the 50% level. Now you can see on this weekly bar that we have actually attempted to test it just as of yesterday, and based on where the stochastic RSI is and the fact that we've got a 7-day down signal, and we're about to get one of the most bullish signals we can see, where the stochastic RSI tops out, turns downwards, but then begins to move up again, as well as the fact that the BX trender has gone from dark green back to light green. It never ticked into red, indicating that buying pressure is still strong. Gives me a really good hope that we actually will break this 50% level. Now, as you can see, the last 50% level we rejected off from the all-time high about 2 weeks ago, which led to a further sell-off, which is, so we're going to measure this new 50% level from the lower swing top. So obviously we've got to break this level at 5,300 before we can think about attempting the level at 5,489 again. Now, if we have a look at where we've actually sold off into from the last 2 weeks, it seems that we have bounced almost perfectly off the 50% level of this massive weekly bar, where obviously it was the Trump said this, Trump said that, whatever. Again, we've cut through the 50% level a bit, but obviously, remember what they always say, amateurs control the open, professionals control the close, and based on where we are now, it is Wednesday evening, my time, here in Australia, so it's going to, the US market hasn't quite opened yet, but the weekly BX trender on the S&P 500 is turning light red, which means that we are getting early signs of a bottom. Remember, confirmation is when it turns light green, but early signs, or an early entry, depending on how you want to trade, would be anywhere around now. Obviously, you want to wait for the close, but you can always front run a trade, take in more risk, but also potential for more profit. Over to the Nasdaq, you can see we have the same signal, the weekly higher-low on the BX trender, obviously unconfirmed, we haven't closed yet. But what we can see is the Nasdaq actually looks stronger than the rest of the S&P 500 right now, because we are above the 50% level at 18,500. Now, same story with what happened 2 weeks ago. We rejected perfectly off this 50% level from not quite the all-time high, but where the breakdown really started, to our correction low. Now, if I redraw that level, if I redo the 50% tool, if I can actually use this software properly. I'm using a trackpad today instead of a mouse, so it's a little bit challenging. Same story here. We cut through the 50% level, amateurs control the open, and it looks like professionals are going to control the close yet again. Now, over to Microsoft. Again, not much has changed here. Trends are still down across the board. We've still got lower lows, which is actually not great, considering we now have 2 dark red bars. So unless something really good happens this week, like pre-market trading is beginning to trade up, Microsoft will continue to be a sell. Same story with Nvidia. We've got pretty much the exact same story as Microsoft, so I won't waste your time on it. Tesla, same story as last week, and a very different story to Microsoft and Nvidia. We look like we are going to get our 3rd consecutive higher low, which is almost a 100% guaranteed signal that we are about to take off. Like, as you saw back here in June of 2021, we got our 3 higher lows, the BX trender turned green, and it was off to the races. We did a 2x move from there. Now, it doesn't actually look like we've got another instance here in September of 2023 where we had the three higher lows. However, we did not tick back into green and we started selling off into lower lows. So obviously, if you wait for this week to close with a higher low, you will either have to get out for a potential small loss, or you will be able to ride a 200 double your money. So you're pretty much risking 270 to 240, 10-15% for a potential 100% upside, which is a 6-to-1 risk versus reward. Now, I haven't actually backtested this much myself on Tesla personally, but if you can get over a 50% win rate, even if you get like a 30% win rate and you're trading a 6-to-1 risk versus reward, you'll still make money at the end of the decade. You're not going to be profitable every single year, but anyways, as Peter DiCarlo always says, you've just got to stick to your strategy over the long run. Right here, it looks like we're actually forming a triple bottom on Tesla. Now, the Gann swing indicator is not quite showing that bottom yet because our swing direction is still down. We need to take out the top of one of the bars. So if this week can move, not close above 265, or if next week can close above 244, we will have printed a triple bottom. And it could also be, provided that this week doesn't go any lower, a very, very slight inverse head and shoulders. Although I personally wouldn't weight that too much. I'd consider that more of a triple bottom. Over to Google, our weekly 2-bar chart is neutral, so we're looking slightly better than Microsoft and Nvidia. However, we do only have the early signs of a single higher low on the BX Trender, so I'm still holding off on any positions. Same thing with Apple, we are down across the board. We're starting to get early signs, a single higher low on the BX Trender, so I may keep it on my watch list for the next few weeks, but I'm not taking any positions just yet. Meta over here is still looking a bit sad, continuing to sell off into lower lows. However, pre-market trading today looks very nice, so potentially very shortly we will start to get the early signs of a higher low on the BX Trender. Over to Amazon, we are down on the weekly 1-bar, but neutral on the 2-bar. However, the BX Trender is still selling off into lower lows, which is not great. Netflix over here looks like it may make a new all-time high tonight. It's currently testing it in pre-market trading. And not only did we make the higher low last week, we are green this week on the BX Trender, which could be the start of a massive breakout. Especially because we have consolidated here quite a bit. I feel like it's not just going to be a 3-week breakout. We could see a 2 or 3 month move, especially if we can break that all-time high, because markets in all-time highs tend to move much cleaner than markets with overhead resistance, as Michael Pizzino always says. So doing so would also turn the weekly trend up, meaning it is pretty much the only Magnificent 7 that would be up on the weekly 1-bar. And yeah, over to MicroStrategy, you can see that we have broken above that 50% level that I was watching. So I am very glad that I did not sell. And it looks like we are also turning light green on the BX Trender, which means, based on the way MicroStrategy has been performing this entire cycle, we are very likely going to see at least another 2 weeks up, potentially multiple months up. Now, as Jason Pizzino always says in his videos, MicroStrategy's done a 4,000% move this cycle, so it's very unlikely it's going to put in another all-time high. Like if you go and watch his videos, he talks about how in the last cycle, MicroStrategy tops out with Bitcoin's first peak, and with that Bitcoin peak later in the year, it makes a lower high. So levels that I am potentially watching, I talked about in my last videos, basically any of these swing tops here. Now, if you, I'm just going to delete that. I can draw that back later. If we have a look at the recent swing high to the triple bottom here, we've got a major 50% level up here at $387, as well as the institutional sell zone, which is from Traders Helping Traders and Peter DiCarlo, and the 50% levels, obviously, GAN teachings from Jason and Michael Pizzino. So these are two resistance levels that I will potentially be looking at selling out of myself, because we've taken out this weekly swing top and the 50% level at, I think 324 was it? So we obviously just look for the next weekly swing top over here at 382, which is pretty much bang on with this 50% level at 387. So taking profits around starting to take profits around 380 would probably not be a bad idea. Coinbase, we are still down on the weekly 1 bar and 2 bar due to how brutal this sell-off is. However, we are looking like we're going to get 3 weekly higher lows, which if we can close like this, would be a very, very good signal. As you can see with a bit of backtesting, when you get that 3 higher lows, it doesn't mean that the bottom is in, but in the long run, it's still a pretty nice price to buy at. One more thing, this cycle, we have actually not seen 3 weekly higher lows in the BX Trender without that third week ticking into the green. And based on the way pre-market trading is looking, if we keep pumping this week, we could turn this bar here green, because the example that I pulled off was from earlier was from the last bear market. So you're either buying if it's a bear market, you're probably buying the low before the final low rather than the dip before the dip before the dip before the dip, which, I mean, if you got in around $50 and you made nearly 6x 2 years later, you probably wouldn't be complaining that you didn't snipe the exact low at $35. And it's pretty much going to be the same thing here. Like, if you're waiting for that 3-week confirmation and you end up buying in at, say, $180 compared to $150, and you sell out at 300 and something, it's going to be a lot nicer than if you bought it at, without waiting for any confirmation. You, like here, you bought it before this week closed, and you bought it at, say, 280. It came up to 300. You didn't sell because you wanted bigger profits, and now you're down huge. I know quite a few people that have done that. AMD still looks tragic. I really don't want to talk about this. It has been my worst performing stock. But CleanSpark, this is one that was on Peter DiCarlo's weekly watch list, and he talked about it in both last week's watch list, which I showed you guys, as well as this week's email that just got sent out to me on Monday, I think, or it might have been yesterday. But basically, he reckons we could see an expansion up to $14 since we are holding the $8 zone because of this falling wedge pattern that we've just broken out of. And potentially, if the parabolic phase of the bull market really takes off, like the Elliott wave analysis on my last video talked about, then we could see prices run to $20, $22. So CleanSpark, we have bounced off the institutional sell level, and based on that huge candle yesterday, we are green on the BX Trender. So I probably will not be selling until we reach $13. And it would be really nice if we could break through this huge resistance cluster and see a really nice clean move for the final phase of the cycle, potentially back to some of our previous all-time highs. No, I'm kidding. I really doubt something like that is going to happen, especially at this stage of the cycle, but you never know. Like, markets can do absolutely crazy things, like 25 to, what is that? $150, a 6x in a single candle. Like, you know? But one thing that I don't like about CleanSpark is we are making lower highs with every cycle. So I really doubt that this thing is going to rip into fresh all-time highs or even break $24. But Peter's target of $20 to $22, a potential lower high, is in my opinion possible. However, I don't think, based on looking at how it's been in previous cycles, lower high after lower high after lower high, that we will break this top at $18. So me taking profits at $13, I'm going to be pretty happy with, as we're approaching a major 50% level from the underside, which is our cycle low to cycle high. I mean, maybe we rip into $14, $15, $16, $17, but from where we got in, around $7, that $13 is nearly a 2x. I'm going to be happy with that. Now, over to cryptos, we can clearly see that Bitcoin, after the consolidation and the 4-hour bull flag that I talked about in my last video, we have seen this massive move out, which Michael Pizzino likes to call a gotcha bar. It basically means we have a pump up. Everyone thinks it's just another fake move like all the moves before it, and will move back into an equal or lower low so they can buy back in at a cheaper price. But instead, we only see these tiny dips which get bought straight back up. As you can see, we had a bit of chop through there. And next thing you know, you get this massive daily bar, which basically means anyone that didn't buy in the consolidation, that was hoping for lower prices or was too scared to buy the actual low, is now still waiting, and they're probably FOMOing in somewhere through here, which is helping to push the price up. Now, speaking of the price, we are now above the all-important previous range low trend line. Now, if you remember, we were consolidating in this range for ages, and it looked like this move here with that close super high on the bar looked like a giant fake out to the downside, and the market was going to take off. Unfortunately, we broke below that range, but we are now back above it, and after retesting the 50 TMA and all that, we are now looking like we are going to close a third consecutive higher low on the BX trender for Bitcoin. Now, if you backtest this signal, you can see that we have not had 3 higher lows in this cycle. So I think the last time that we had 3 higher lows was here, coming out of the COVID low. And you can see after that, as soon as the BX trender closed green, we never revisited those low prices. So it was time for the parabolic move. Now, if you remember where I marked the CRO chart up, I believe we are probably more in a consolidation like this, where we are going to get that this week could potentially close light green if price continues to pump just a bit more, and we'll see potentially another 10-20% move before a sell-off, and then another move into the all-time high. So what does this look like on this chart? Well, if you go and watch Jason Pizzino's video today, he uses trend-based fib extensions, and he talks about how price could potentially reject at around $104,000. And if that did happen, we would see a retest of where we are now, which could be the higher low that is very similar to what happened through here last cycle. And then we would see the final parabolic move into the cycle top at either 117, 120k, or better yet, we flip this yellow trend line as resistance, we consolidate above it, and then we go parabolic. Just some hopium for you guys. Now, if we head back to my video from last week, you can see that we have not gotten that sharp wave 4 correction that I was anticipating would happen. Now, this wave 3 here could very likely take us up further than what I marked it as. So I was anticipating that $95,000 would act as resistance, and for now, if my chart decides to load, it is still acting as resistance. We are 10 bars up on our 4-hour chart, which using Gann's 7 to 10 bar rule, we should expect a pause or a reversal. Now, further on, we have actually exceeded the target of this bull flag as well. So, right now, the market is. Oh, my chart did load. I was just panned too far up. Big brain. Yeah. So, if I draw a Elliott wave again quickly from what I was doing, now, impulse wave. So if we count that as our wave 1, this is our wave 2, this could be our wave 3. Now, because Elliott wave 3 is typically the longest and strongest wave, but as Michael Pizzino says, we're treating Bitcoin as a commodity in which wave 5 could be the longest and strongest wave, which is why I predicted that we would potentially reject off 95k and then have a sharper pullback, which would scare some people who have bought here out of their positions, and then the market would reverse, forcing them to FOMO in at higher prices, which could lead to this breakout to 104k, 110k, who knows. But yeah, so obviously the market does not have to stop here, like as you saw based on the BX trender. Oh, I was using this chart, but as you saw, when I backtested with 2021 data, it's very unlikely that based on where we are in the cycle, we're going to have the 3 light red weeks like we did out of the COVID low and have 2 more huge pumps, which is possible, and that's what Satoshi Stacker, another YouTuber that I watch, potentially thinks, that this cycle will go into, say, March of 2026. But a lot of other people think it ends in October 2026. Sorry, October this year. So that would mean we are potentially somewhere here, and it's more than likely this week continues up and we see light green on the BX trender rather than light red. If I zoom in for you, we are so close to ticking green. So with that in mind, it's possible that something like this still plays out, or we end up with something like this, our nice psychological number, as well as our some of major swing tops over here at 99-100k. We could see a very brutal wave 4 correction, but as long as that wave 4 does not go below where wave 2 is, this structure is still valid. So as long as we don't sell off below 84k, we could pump to 100k and then sell off back down to this trend line at 93k, which would be a super scary move for the market. If my maths is right, that's nearly 7%. You might see 15, 20, 25, 30% wiped off your favorite altcoin. So if I take, let's say, Sui, which has been doing really well, and it comes pretty much right back to just above the breakout zone. So let's say if it went from 290 to 220, that would absolutely scare the bejesus out of people and would cause them to FOMO back in with a market reversal. Anyways, that is just my 6th sense on the market. If we head back over here to the crypto fear and greed, why did I refresh it? It's still got 13 hours. But we have gone from fear to neutral and then into greed. That's a 25-point increase overnight. So I just don't think this is sustainable. Like, I just think the market's gotten too greedy too quickly. So I don't think something like this will play out. I still think what I said last week, something like this is much more likely to play out, where we retest potentially the breakout zone or one of these swing tops. So something like that. Again, just my opinion, the markets don't care what I think, but another thing, the markets will just do whatever they want. regardless of what I think. Another thing we're looking at is the long-short ratio. We are 4% differential, and if you remember in Michael Pizzino's videos, he talks about any differential more than 3% could potentially lead to a snapback reversal, which is what I am anticipating right here. And another thing, we have had one of our largest short liquidation days in history. Like, if you have a look here, we had $517 million yesterday, with $565 million in the rolling 24-hour period. Back here, we had $543 million and $470 million and 427 million on that Trump election day. So 517 million is, yeah, our second largest day. And if you remember, all of these other days led to at least a temporary pause in the trend. Now, obviously, in the case of the Trump pump, it paused, but it continued. So, which is why I still think this wave structure, regardless of where this low comes in, as long as it doesn't go below $84,000, is still valid, and we are going to see higher prices. So that's pretty much all my analysis for today, and yeah, thank you all for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Goodbye.